Well, many farmers are going to be hurt by the Albanese government's tax.
There's a boom in the number of homes up for sale, with claims property investors are fleeing Victoria because of higher land tax and interest rates.
The Prime Minister and Premier have been heckled by angry farmers at the National Bush Summit in Ballarat.
There was a deal, an unspoken contract at the heart of the Australian dream. You work the land, you battle the droughts and the floods, you pour your blood, sweat and tears into the soil. And at the end of the day, you get a fair go. You get to build a life, feed the nation and pass something on to your kids. But what happens when that deal is broken? What happens when the government you trust, the system you've paid into your entire life, decides you're not a partner anymore? You're just an ATM? In Victoria, in the winter of 2025, the government found a new way to declare war on the people who feed this nation. They didn't use bullets, they didn't use tanks, they used a tax bill, a piece of paper that landed in the letterboxes of farmers already on their knees, battling the worst drought in living memory, and told them, we're coming for your land, we're coming for your livelihood, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. This isn't just a story about a new tax. This is a story about a government so arrogant, so disconnected from reality that it tried to pull off one of the most brazen cash grabs in Australian history, targeting the very people we all depend on to survive. It's a story of betrayal, of uprising, and of a fight that is far from over. Before we get into the guts of this, a quick word. What you're about to hear is the story the mainstream media is too scared to tell. They'll give you the government's talking points, the sanitised press releases, but they won't show you the rage, the betrayal, the raw truth of what's happening in rural Australia. We will, but we can't do it without you. The only reason we can bring you these uncensored stories, the reason we can expose the rot in the system, is because of our supporters on Patreon. They are the resistance. They are the ones funding the fight back. If you believe in what we do, if you've had a gutful of the lies and spin, then join us. For a few bucks a month, you can become part of the front line in the information war. The link is in the description. Be a legend. Check it out. You'll get access to our unfiltered content that we just can't show you here. Now, let's talk about how you kick a farmer when he's down. It all started with a new name for an old tax. The Victorian government decided to replace the Fire Services Property Levy, or FSPL, with something called the Emergency Services and Volunteers Fund, the ESVF. Sounds noble, doesn't it? Funding for our heroic volunteers. Who could argue with that? Well, the devil, as always, was in the details. Buried in the legislation, which was rammed through Parliament in a late-night session on May 15th while most of us were asleep, was a little detail they hoped no one would notice. For residential properties, the variable rate was set to almost double, a 99% increase. But for our farmers, for primary production land, it was a whole different level of bastardry. The old rate was 28.7 cents for every $1,000 of a farm's capital improved value. The new rate, 71.8 cents. That's not a tax increase. That's a declaration of economic war. It's a 150% increase. Let me say that again. 150%. And get this. That was the generous version. The government's first proposal, before it got slightly watered down, was for a 189% increase. They were going to nearly triple it, but settled for just completely screwing them over instead. What does this look like for a family farm? Let's take a modest $2 million property. Under the old system, their bill was about $841 a year. Under the new system, it would have skyrocketed to over $1,700. For a bigger $10 million farm, the bill would jump from around $3,000 to nearly $7,500. And this was happening while farmers were facing what the Victorian Farmers Federation called the worst drought conditions in living memory.
Now, you're right about the drought. In parts of Victoria, it's the worst we've ever seen. It's seen farmers forced to send thousands of dairy cattle to be slaughtered because they can't afford to feed them. Feed costs have soared to record highs.
Autumn rains had failed. Paddocks were bare. Farmers were already selling off livestock. Their cost had tripled in 5 years and their revenue was flat. And that is when the government decided to strike. But they miscalculated. They thought the farmers would just cop it sweet. They thought the people of the bush were isolated, that they wouldn't fight back. They were dead wrong.
People are under stress. The volunteer fire services levy, combined with the threat of power lines and having your land taken out from under you, is bordering on unbearable, and it is not sustainable.
On May 20th, just 5 days after the law was passed, they came. Thousands of them. A convoy of CFA fire trucks rolled down the highways. Farmers left their drought-stricken properties at the crack of dawn to descend on the steps of Parliament House in Melbourne. And they weren't just farmers. They were joined by the very people this tax was supposedly meant to help, the volunteer firefighters. The irony was staggering. The government was forcing volunteers to pay to be volunteers. As one farmer from Elmore, David Johnson, put it, "Bloody hell, how many charities or organisations do you know where the volunteers have to pay to be volunteers? It's not on." And then came the moment that defined the protest. The moment that showed the government just how deep the anger ran. A farmer, with the help of a couple of Liberal MPs, walked right up to Premier Jacinta Allen's office, a place you can only get to with a parliamentary pass, and delivered a message. A box of cow manure. The note attached said it all. "Dearest Jacinta, I've considered your levy and here's my feedback. It's bullshit. Love Brutus and family." Of course, the politicians in their ivory tower clutched their pearls. They demanded an investigation. They were more offended by a box of crap than they were by the fact they were driving the people who feed our nation into the ground. Eliza Ayres, another farmer from Elmore, summed up the desperation. "I am here because I don't know any farmer who can actually afford this. Our prices have tripled over the past 5 years, but our revenue has not. So basically, we can't afford this levy." This wasn't a protest for a pay rise. This was a protest for survival. And you know what? It worked. The sight of thousands of furious farmers and firefighters, the image of that box of manure, the sheer political pressure, it was too much. 10 days. That's all it took. 10 days after the protest, on May 30th, the government announced a backdown, a retreat. They announced they would freeze the levy for farmers. For 1 year only, the rate would stay at the old 28.7 cents.
Jacinta Allen has hit pause on a controversial new tax just a week after mass protests in the city. Farmers have been given a reprieve from the emergency services levy, a decision the Premier is blaming on drought, not discontent.
Victory, right? Wrong. This isn't a victory. This is a temporary truce, a ceasefire. The government didn't scrap the law. They didn't admit they were wrong. They just hit the pause button. As the protest organisers said in a joint statement, the government has made clear that the pause for farmers is for this year only. The tax will hang over the heads of every Victorian, including farmers, businesses and homeowners, for every year to come. It's a sword of Damocles hanging over every farming family in the state. They know that on July 1st, 2026, unless this law is completely torn up, that 150% increase is coming right back. The government is just hoping that by then, the outrage will have died down. They're hoping we'll all forget. They're playing the long game. And to add insult to injury, they tried to spin this as an act of compassion. They bundled the announcement with $37 million in drought funding, trying to look like the good guys. But farmers saw right through it. As VFF President Brett Hosking said, it's a glimmer of hope, but it doesn't change the underlying problem. This levy is an unfair cost shift onto farmers. And here's the part that should terrify every single person in Australia, whether you live in the city or the bush. A farm tax is a food tax. Farmers can't just absorb these costs. They're not multinational corporations with billion-dollar profits. They're family businesses operating on razor-thin margins. When their costs go up, the price of the food they produce has to go up. Analysts have warned that this levy, when it inevitably comes back, could lead to food price increases of 3 to 5%. Your bread, your milk, your meat, your vegetables, all of it more expensive because a greedy government in Melbourne sees farmers as a walking ATM. And it's part of a disturbing global pattern. We've seen it in the Netherlands with government policies forcing farmers to reduce livestock. We've seen it in the UK with tax changes threatening to break up family farms. And now we're seeing it here, a coordinated global squeeze on the people who produce our food. This isn't just a tax, it's legalised theft. It's a betrayal of the Australian spirit. We're a nation built on the back of our farmers, a nation that prides itself on a fair go, but there is no fair go in a system that punishes volunteer firefighters for their service. There is no fair go in a system that hits people with a 150% tax hike during the worst drought in memory. And there is no fair go in a system that thinks a one-year pause is a substitute for justice. The fight isn't over. The farmers of Victoria have drawn a line in the sand. They've shown that when you push them too far, they will fight back. And we need to stand with them because their fight is our fight. Their survival is our survival. The government is counting on you to forget. They're hoping this story gets buried. We won't let that happen. If you want to keep fighting back against the corruption and the lies, if you want to support a media that actually holds them to account, then please, consider joining our Patreon. It's the only way we can keep bringing you the truth. To see the latest Australian crisis, click this video here.